Okay, folks, here we are back at Java Joe's once again. Now, I've found and cornered on my little round table, which is the size of a 24-inch pizza, two Iowans, which are an incredible scarcity here in Iowa with all the media. The MSNBC folks are right behind us, and the impeachment trials are droning on the television. But I actually have two bona fide Iowans at the table to break it down caucus-wise here. And so tell me who you are and where you're from, and we'll kick this thing around.
I'm Berrett Rice. I have lived in Ames for a long time, so I'm going to say I'm from Ames.
That would be appropriate.
I'm saying I'm a qualified Iowan. I didn't grow up here, but I am. I've been here. I've spent most of my adult life here.
That makes you an Iowan. Yeah. And tell me your name again.
Berrett Rice.
Berrett Rice. And what do you do?
I'm a school psychologist.
Okay, so that's for the benefit of the students, right?
That is the idea, yeah.
Mental health, okay, good. And sitting next to is?
Derrick Luttrell.
Derrick Luttrell, and you're originally from Chicago, but you're also an Iowan.
Yes, I am.
And you're from here in Des Moines, is that correct?
Suburb of Des Moines, Adel, Iowa.
Adel. So Des Moines is actually a large enough metropolis that it can actually have suburbs. It actually has moons and planets in its orbit by the name of suburbs.
Yes, it does. Yeah, many. That's exactly right.
Now, is it a continuous suburb where it's like homes, or are there farms between you and the center, or what?
In my case, there's farmland. Actually, Warren Buffett owns most of it, and it's going to turn into a big power plant, but between here and there. But, yeah.
And how is Warren as a neighbor? Do you come over? Does he invite you? And he say, hey, come on over, get some stuff, hang out?
Oddly enough, I have actually met him once. He's a very nice guy, but not in that context, but he's a nice guy.
Oh, yeah. And what do you do, sir?
I sell automobiles.
Oh, okay. And this particular dealership or a brand?
Stu Hansen Hyundai.
Okay, Hyundais. Okay, so foreign trade and tariffs, they mean something to you.
Every day.
Now, let me ask you this. If I walked into your dealership maybe 5 years ago, before this tariff war, what would be the price difference maybe based on, 5 years ago and now, just based on tariff, steel, everything that, has been in the news?
Oddly enough, you wouldn't feel it as much as you may think. Cars have a natural progression. They go up about 4% every year with each model year. A lot of that has been eaten by taking less profit on the car. So the prices themselves are not that different. A 2011 Sonata Limited, for instance, was about $33,000 in 2011. Same car now is about $35,000. But we probably are making less on that car today than we would have been.
So you're absorbing it, not necessarily the consumers. Now, you guys are going to caucus, and my own observations anecdotally basically has been a lot of people, especially Iowans, they're not totally sure. They don't know what they feel. So you're going to be going in tonight to your respective caucuses, which is a social event. You're going to be looking for women, which is the purpose of a caucus. You see people you recognize from Tinder and Bumble and Hinge. And I swiped left on her last week. Can I switch that? I'm sorry. I really apologize. I kind of like you, especially now that you're a Bernie supporter. Anyway, have you made a decision?
I've made a decision, yes.
Are you willing to offer it up to obscurity here?
I'm willing to say that just as of yesterday, I've decided to go with Klobuchar.
And why?
I want to support one of the moderates, and I think she's more electable than Pete. And I'm concerned about Biden's age, if I can say that.
Did you see Biden?
I did. Just last week I was in a room with him, and actually he was very dynamic. He was very, very sharp. But I watched him in the debates, the televised debates too, and I didn't think he looked good.
I saw him in Cedar Falls, or Cedar Rapids, rather, a couple days ago, and I was surprised how in shape and youthful and spry he looked. And I was trying to identify what platform that he's actually running on, and I finally decided he's running on the good guy platform.
Let's go back to normal. Let's go back to the days when our blood pressure didn't go up every day when we watched the news.
And by the way, that's not a bad platform considering the social moment we're in.
It's a really good platform. I think it's a powerful message. And I could go for Biden. I would say he's my number 2. Honestly, like, in the caucuses, that if your candidate doesn't reach a threshold, you have to move. I'll probably move to Biden.
Now, I would say this: if there's any candidate amongst the top tier, and by that I mean Amy, Pete, Biden, Sanders, and Warren, I feel like the one that's really in the most danger of being eliminated would be Klobuchar. If she can't really cross a threshold, I think she's probably done.
I agree. I think she's at 8 or 9% right now.
Right.
So, but yeah, I think I have to start by going with what I want, and then if I'm forced to choose a second choice, I will.
Well, that's one of the cool things about the caucusing process, is that, first of all, it's a social event. It has you feel the pressure of your community, and two, you have to make a decision based on electability, which is really, if you're concerned truly about our country, that's the key issue, I think, in this election.
The number one issue, according to everybody I've spoken to, is electability. I haven't heard anyone say anything else.
Right, because if you take a drone and you fly up about 1,000 yards, guess what? Most of those candidates, even the so-called moderate wing or the so-called liberal, progressive wing, they're in general alignment with each other. I feel that if you fly up a little bit higher, they're in alignment. And the PVP, by that I mean Putin's vice president, definitely offers up a different worldview. So
I think Sanders is a little bit of an outlier on policy. But yeah, generally I agree with you.
Yeah. Now, sir, have you made a decision?
I have not.
Have you narrowed it down?
Yes.
You want to talk about it?
Sure. Elizabeth Warren, really high on my list. I think she's, we were talking about this earlier with a group of friends, I think she's feisty enough to take a fight to Trump and also defend herself in a fight with Trump. I think really it is electability. I think the most important thing in this particular race is who at the end can beat Donald Trump. And there's a part of me, honestly, I don't know that any of them can defeat Donald Trump. But I want to pick the person that has the best shot at doing it, and she's probably my number one choice. I like you. Biden is probably my second choice. But I just, if I had to. My son was pressing me last night to give him an answer, and who would I just don't know.
You don't know.
Yeah.
But you're going to make a decision tonight. So we've got Elizabeth, and we've got Biden, we've got Amy in the mix. What's your take on Pete?
My daughter supports Pete. My wife, matter of fact, and drove to Iowa City yesterday to see Pete. Your viewers can't see me, but I'm an African American.
Oh my God, I had no clue. Holy, it's funny how appearances can be so deceiving.
Well, it's Iowa. You just automatically assume.
Well, so you know what? People say, where are your relatives from? My ancestors are from Africa, okay? They are.
Well, all of our ancestors are from Africa.
Bingo, okay? We're all sharing. We all come from the same neck of the woods, somewhere near the Olduvai Gorge. We're all from the same area, but I'm glad you broached the subject. I didn't want to have to break it. You're actually African American. On the off chance that you didn't know you were African American, I wanted you to know. So,
I thought it looked in my hand when I put it on.
Yeah, oh my God. So talk to me about what you were going to say.
But his record in Indiana concerns me. I'm not saying it's a disqualifier, but it concerns me. He seemed to be sometimes as racially insensitive, maybe as who we have in office now. So just for that reason, I'm not sure that I could full-throatedly support him unless he was a nominee. If he becomes a nominee, I'll write checks, I'll do whatever it takes to get him in. But
now let me ask you this. As an African American, and you've seen a lot of political candidates come down the pike over the decades. When you look at them, how do you make a judgment whether you feel like they're racist or they're accommodating to racists or just where they stand in terms of, to me the core issue or one of the big issues is acknowledging the truth of our history in America. And you can't, in my view, get justice unless you recognize the truth. And the truth, of course, is slavery, but it's also Jim Crow, it's also segregation, it's a whole multi-generation, it's genocide, not only for African Americans, for our native people. I mean, they suffered an absolute genocide. And unless you recognize that as just truth, it's hard to get into your head some of the ideas like reparations, social, what is the obligation that a society has for restorative justice? We can't reverse the past, but we can recognize as a goal the need for restorative justice. So when you look at a candidate, what are your clues? How do you kind of make those kind of decisions?
Honestly, that's not something that when I'm looking at a candidate that is forebrain necessarily. If someone does something that clearly stands out, or if they have a record that clearly stands out as something that's concerning. But truthfully, a candidate, they're saying what appeals to the mass of people. And I'll give you a very funny story. So I've luckily done okay in life, right? So, and I'm a recovering Republican. And I went to...
You're also recovering African American Republican.
It's very confusing and complex. But I went to a campaign event for a gentleman who was running for Congress. And he was in the middle of his speech, and he was giving a speech. And I walked into the room, and he immediately and very uncomfortably switched gears to talking about welfare and welfare reform. And he didn't know who I was. I lived 3 blocks away from him. Our kids were on the same swim team. Neither of our kids needed welfare or any of those things. But people say what they think you want to hear. So that's not something that I necessarily listen for. It really becomes, what are your actions? What does your past record say? But I'm not necessarily listening for it when someone's giving a stump speech, because you're not going to hear it.
Now, we've had some interesting things. There's some popular ideas floating around. One is that Pete doesn't have traction with the African American community. Biden does. Kamala was unable to at least pull powerfully in that area, as was Cory Booker. So as a result, they had to bail, because math is math in politics, Now, that's just what we're hearing, but do you think that's true?
Well, Kamala was the person I supported before she even would admit that she was going to run. I mean, I was all in, and it was easy, because that's what I would have supported. But math is math. I don't know if I agree with the way the Democratic Party has decided to structure the math and who gets in and who doesn't get in. Not a huge fan of Tom Perez and the way he's doing things, but I mean, it's true. You have to have a certain number of people support you in order to get elected, and when you have 30 or 40 people running for office, it fragments it so poorly or so greatly that it's hard to really focus on the 2 people that you really want to focus on, or the 2 people that I really want to focus on. So I think you do have to have some way of narrowing the field. Just not sure if that's the way I would have done it. But.
Now, being an African American and at one time being Republican, I thought one of the injustices of one of the sort of reverse forms of racism is that I think a black person has as much right to be a conservative as a white person. Why should they be restricted to that? They're free to believe whatever they want, just as I am. Your thoughts about that?
Sure. I don't think we're that different than anyone else. We might have a different history. We have gotten here for a different reason, but I think I'm concerned about the same things you guys are concerned about. I want my kids to have a good education, have a good future. I want decent housing. I want to put away money for retirement. I want to do all the things that everyone else wants to do. It's really no different. Therefore, there are, believe it or not, there are African Americans who are conservative, and but it's for those reasons. And as society has gotten to the point that we have more access to things, the conservative base has grown a little more because your concerns change. You do start worried about your 401k, and you start worried about housing and those things that, maybe in 1940 we didn't worry about, but we do worry about today.
And by the way, in 1940, the Republicans were, black people identified with Republicans because that was the party of Lincoln, and the Democratic Party in America at that time was holding down Jim Crow and was standing in the way of any kind of progress in civil rights in the Senate or in the politics. Really wasn't until Nixon Kennedy that it started to shift. When John Kennedy started to acknowledge the struggles of Martin Luther King, that the black community really shifted and felt like, you know what, there's more comfort for us. But Nixon competed for the black vote on the strength of these traditions.
I 100% agree with that. And it was really, he doesn't get credit for it all the time, but it was really Lyndon Johnson who really solidified the African-American base within the Democratic Party. Kennedy went there kind of because his brother pushed him there. Right. Wasn't really necessarily by choice, but he was still there. But Johnson was full-throated. I mean, he was in.
Well, of course, Johnson, let's say he carried the ball into the end zone with regards to the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act and Medicare, and he was a conflicted person himself. His own background was Southern. He did not identify with civil rights historically over his career. But when I was a kid, and you walked into an African American home, there were two paintings on the wall: John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King, and maybe Abraham Lincoln, depending, how far back you go. So I'm very sensitive to that in my own story, in my own work as a screenwriter, I have to say. But I could tell you about that. So we have like, what do we have here? We have your candidate is.
Well, as I said, Biden's by second choice. I do like Elizabeth Warren, though. I really do like Elizabeth Warren.
I saw Biden, and he's got that kind of country Joe empathy, good guy feeling. It just oozes out of his pores. I'm suffering too. Hey, I'm a good guy. We can bring this country together, because I'm a good guy. It's the power of the good guy platform. I'm a good guy. You get it? I'm a good guy. And I kind of felt like that's his platform. And Elizabeth, well, how would I describe her platform? First, I know you can't tell on television, but when you see me in person, I'm kind of cute. Yeah.
Just don't know it on television, but she's kind of cute.
Yeah. And for 70, she's really fucking cute. As a matter of fact, she's hot, okay? Now, I'm not allowed to sort of make that kind of judgment on a female candidate. I know I'm going to, probably go to jail for that for a couple years, but still.
My wife says I'm a chauvinist all the time. This will solidify it, even though I'm really not, but she says I am.
Well, she is an attractive person, and she works very hard at identifying with the people who she's campaigning. When I was there, she was in such a rush that she couldn't do her little selfie line, so she left her dog. So everybody took selfies with her dog. And, she's also in the politics of identification, like a school teacher, her middle-class background. I think she's a compelling candidate. My only question, and maybe you can answer this for me, if and when an Elizabeth Warren or a Joe Biden, let's say, gets to the White House, and they look down the street and there's that Senate, and maybe Mitch McConnell is sitting there going, okay, what do you got, sweetheart? Or Bernie, bring it. Like that single payer thing, how are they going to deal with that in the real world? And the big question I'm going to ask, are you willing to take a first down, or are you just going to insist on throwing a bomb and scoring a touchdown? That's like almost like a philosophical political choice that people are going to have to deal with, not on the campaign trail, but if and when they get to govern.
So you're saying, are you willing to move the ball a little bit forward instead of going for a Hail Mary? I would rather move the ball a little bit forward. I've been watching McConnell since his time with Obama, he will make it his goal in life to stop everything that a Sanders or a Warren would do, really that any Democrat would do. So the big things are most likely not going to happen. When I hear people say they're scared of Medicaid for all, my response is, don't worry about it. Unless you get rid of McConnell, it's not going to happen.
So you would be basically in alignment with what I'm saying, which is you have to take progress where you can get it in the real world.
I think that's the real world, yeah.
I think that was the lesson that Obama really, the perfect is the enemy of the good, or the good of the somehow the perfect and the good are enemies, and you got to take the good as opposed to worrying about the perfect, and that's real.
It's exactly real. And anytime anybody's running for office, they're a Democrat, they're going to run to the left in the beginning. If they're Republican, they're going to run to the far right. But most of the time, you have to meet somewhere in the middle, and I 100% agree with you. We're not going to have Medicare for all in the foreseeable future, unless something really drastic were to happen in the Senate, which I don't want to divert, but I think they need term limits, but that's a whole different conversation. But until something like that happens, that's not going to happen.
It's supposed to work. We have a system that's supposed to force compromise.
Right.
So we're not supposed to have a system where one party or one individual gets everything they want. No part of the country is supposed to get whatever they want. We're supposed to be forced to move into the middle, and we're supposed to be forced into more of a centrist position. That's the way that our system is set up.
So that's why I'm unable to get the girl that I really want.
Maybe. It might be.
But I've got to settle for someone who has some qualities that I actually admire. But the girl that I love, no, Bill, the system is set up, so I can't get her.
Yeah, the other hypothesis is that you get on the radio and say how hot Elizabeth Warren is. Those are the two possible reasons you're not getting the girl you want.
Might work.
Well, I don't know if hot's the right word, but she's appealing, she's attractive, and it comes off in person in a way that you don't get under the pressure of those lights and television. She has a sort of folksy Oklahoma Midwestern kind of dimension to her that's, I think Hillary had certain qualities that were you didn't get unless you maybe knew her. She was, I thought, unfairly kind of judged on that basis too.
Maybe. I saw Elizabeth Warren just yesterday in Ames. I think you were at the same event. And she is very dynamic, very powerful personality. You can feel her presence in the room. She's pretty impressive.
And, there's a couple septuagenarian candidates out there, Bernie, Joe, Elizabeth. She doesn't look it.
No, she does not. She bounces into that room.
And that was, I was like, wow, and people loved her. I liked her. I struggle with the same question that, like, are you going to take a first down or are you going to just insist on a touchdown? And I think she's going to struggle with that if she gets there.
I think she describes the problem better than anybody. If you were there yesterday, the first maybe 10 minutes or so, I was just thinking she understands, she gets it. She was talking about the problem and describing it in a way that I've never heard anyone else describe it, or more effectively than I've ever heard anyone else. And then she pivots to fundamental structural change, and that's where I start to think, I'm not sure that we're ready for that, and I'm not sure we can get that with as we said earlier, McConnell in the Senate.
Well, if you look back in history, Woodrow Wilson wanted the League of Nations. He campaigned furiously for it. It actually cost him his life, and it didn't happen in his life. But 25, 30 years later, we got the United Nations. So there is something to be said for struggling and fiercely fighting for what you want, even though you may not get it.
Yeah, I agree. I think you have to get what you. The good is what is Obama's thing? You just said
something. The perfect is the good of the enemy is the good, or the good is the friends with the something about the good and the perfect and the enemy. I don't know.
Some good, that's better than getting than getting nothing. Maybe it's not as good as getting everything, but we usually don't get everything.
And I would say that Barack Obama, he moved the ball on healthcare in a way that nobody had since Lyndon Johnson. He was the first president in my lifetime who really said, no, health is not a commodity like a Hyundai or pork bellies. It's a right. And to the extent that we can expand that to more people, that's progress. He did something that no American president has done. If he was Republican and if he was white and if he passed Obamacare, there would be a guy with a chisel and a hammer on Rushmore, and he'd be going, how do I get the ears on this Obama guy? Because he'd be on Rushmore.
pass Obamacare in Massachusetts, and he was a hero among Republicans for doing it.
Exactly. So the irony, the racism that's just built into that, it's the American curse, really.
And I understand how fundamentally hard it was to do what he did. The job that I do now is a retirement job. I had another career prior to this, but I was on a Senate subcommittee on healthcare reform back in the Clinton days, and a lot of what Obama did was framed by what we did back then, but we couldn't get it done. So for him, in this case, to take the ball, really actually took it to the goal line. I realized how hard of a struggle that was because we tried it and we all felt that we were pretty good, and there was a lot of smart people in the big room, and I was in a small room with a lot of smart people, and it didn't get done. And I never thought it would get done. So when that did happen, that's a huge accomplishment. And yeah, the Republicans want to make a big deal and say it's the worst that's ever happened, but it really wasn't. It's something that we needed as a country, and he did it. I never believed it would happen.
I'm on Obamacare. I asked this woman yesterday, and I'll wrap this up because they're going to be getting going soon. She's running for Senate. I mentioned you. Her name is Kimberly Graham. And I asked her, well, I'm a union member, SAG and AFTRA, and I have a health insurance plan through that union that people before me, and even I have been on strike for, walked picket lines for, to get improvements in that health care plan. When you want to do this single payer thing, you're also asking me, who's basically in alignment with you as a liberal, as a union member, to give up what people in my union and myself went on strike for, negotiated for, suffered for. I think that's a pretty tough haul, even for the people that would be more inclined to agree with you.
I don't know what to say to that. What I can tell you, my own personal interest in healthcare is my son has Crohn's disease, which is a very expensive disease. He's doing well. He doesn't have a lot of symptoms, but the reason he doesn't have them is because he's on a treatment that costs about $18,000 every 6 weeks, so about $12,000 a month if you average it out. Obviously, we can't afford anything like that. Right now, he's being covered by insurance, but if we lose coverage for pre-existing conditions, I know 2 people with his exact condition who were uninsurable before the ACA. One of them went about a year and a half with no treatment at all, ended up having multiple surgeries. One of them had treatment, moved to a different job, and lost her treatment. And so, electability is my number one concern, but my number one actual concern in terms of issues is making sure that kids like my son can have health care.
Not only as kids, but as adults, too.
Really, even more so as adults, because he's covered under me right now. He's 18. If Obamacare wasn't there, or the ACA wasn't there, he's 2 years away from being thrown out on the street.
Right.
Yeah.
But now not so. He's protected.
Right now, he's got protection. He could get his own insurance plan. But before the ACA, he would have had to always have a job, always be in a big corporation that has some kind of a big healthcare pool, or be at a university or something. If he ever found himself between jobs or switching jobs, he's screwed.
He's going to be stung by a cobra, and I know you get the metaphor. Yeah, well, folks, you guys have been great. I think as I look out, it looks like they're getting ready to begin whatever is their next broadcast. The stand-ins are there so the cameras can focus. And what time is it here in Iowa? Well, it's 1:15. And you guys are going to be going to Caucus later, but you're here to hang. And I want you guys to shake hands because you're new friends. MSNBC. And I just got a sign from somebody with an NBC placard on his jacket, and it said 5 minutes. Yeah, so they don't want any more commentary behind their scenes. So we're going to turn this thing off. And thanks, you guys, for breaking it down, caucus-wise and culture-wise and African-American-wise and white guy-wise, because where are we? We're in the WPL. We're in white people land, and we want to...
The white guy vote.
It's a very powerful responsibility. It's a big block. And here's a smaller block, but you cannot.
He's going to get a break, though. That's what I'm wondering.
Well, you asked Trump. He's asking that question, too. So.
No, that's what I'm saying.
All right, you guys, thanks. And to my listeners, thanks for hanging. This will be up and available shortly. And to everybody, once again, namaste, shalom, and aloha, or nama shaloha.